All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Refined Savage podcast. Let's get to some quick business before we get started. All right, let's talk about the breath belt. The breath belt, my new favorite piece of weightlifting gear. It is fantastic. Anybody who has a set of hips, according to Jesse, will benefit from the breath belt, and I have seen it in action. I'm a big fan. Give it a shot. Check them out at thebreathbelt.com. Use the code SAVAGE20 at checkout. Savage, all caps, 20 at checkout. Stay Classy Meats. Stay Classy Meats, the best meat delivery service in the game. Fresh meat delivered right to your home in a freezer-packed cooler. Their bison is out of this world. Their beef is out of this world. Their pork, their bacon. Pork is bacon, same deal. Chicken. They even have like jerky and things like that. All fantastic stuff. And like I said, it's delivered right to your house. You don't even have to leave the goddamn house. It comes right to you. All these animals are humanely raised, humanely processed. They've eaten on the things they're supposed to be eating. They're drinking the things they're supposed to be drinking. And they are very tasty. So give them a holler. StayClassyMeats.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout for 10% off. Serious deal. If you have any kind of gym you're trying to outfit, and you need anything from plates to bars, even to like grippers. I mean, they have some of the best stuff around. I've used their grippers. What else did I have in theirs? I have a hip circle. I've got elbow wraps. Their bands are fantastic. Their elbow sleeves are awesome. Give them a holler. SeriousSteel.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout. Let's talk about CBD oil. If you are using CBD oil and you're saying to yourself, it really doesn't work that well, there's a lot of shit out there. There's a lot of bad products out there, especially if you're in a state like Ohio that is outlawing cannabis. Check out Warrior CBD. I am a huge fan. Warrior CBD, created by jiu-jitsu and MMA fighters. And if you know how those guys live, they are always beat up and broken, and CBD oil is a game changer for them. It's a game changer for me. I love it. I use it every day. WarriorCBDofficial.com. Use the code WARRIOR20 off at checkout. Cerberus Strength. If you are any kind of strength athlete or want to be strength athlete, Cerberus Strength is the place to go for you. They have belts, wraps, straps, knee sleeves, t-shirts, smelling salts, tacky, anything you need, Cerberus has it. They will help you compete. When Highland Games season's opened up again, I want to see people wearing Cerberus gear out there on the field. Check them out at cerberus-strength.us and use the code REFINESAVAGE10 at checkout. Finally today, Viking Coffee. Viking Coffee, the best in the business, my favorite coffee. Check out Old Man Strength. That's the show brew. That is my favorite, but his other stuff is all awesome. I am a big fan. Check out his new flights, coffee flights he's got. They're called longboat flights. Check them out. Awesome stuff. Use the code VikingCoffee10 at checkout. VikingCoffeeCo.com. Today on the show, the man, the myth, the legend, NFL Coach of the Year, formerly with the Carolina Panthers, now kicking butt in the private sector, Coach Joe Kenn, Big House Power. If you don't know who Joe Kenn is, you've been hiding under a rock for a long time. Otherwise, you should listen to this podcast. Check him out. Joe is a wealth of knowledge, and I was so psyched to have him on the show. Thank you very much, Coach Kenn, and we will do it again sometime. Guys, enjoy this, and we will see you at the end. All right, Coach Kenn. No, I'm not having KO on this show. This is a KO-free zone. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Very good. Where are you at on the shore, you said?
So I have a condo on Ocean Isle Beach in North Carolina. So it's about 3.5 hours of me driving from my house. It's a good enough drive, and it gets us away, and something that we've talked about a long time, my wife and I, through our coaching journey, was she loves the coast. And, and I had her in the desert for most of my career, being in, Idaho, Utah, and then Arizona. There's no water close to those states. So it's worked out good for all of us. And, we got very, very fortunate that it came at a good time. We were on a playoff run, so we had some money to invest at that time. That always helps when you have found money. And it's been a good investment for us because we Airbnb it, so it kind of pays for itself when we're not here. And it's right. I mean, literally, man, I could walk over here and one of my former players I was on the call with yesterday, Ryan Khalil, and I showed him looking out the deck. I mean, we're right on the ocean, so it's a really good spot. You know, you always look at investments like that. What's a good investment, or more importantly, your return on investment, right?
Yeah.
And that's in a lot of things. That's not just in real estate, but that's in life and training and what decisions you make and what's the ramifications of a good decision versus a not so good decision. So it's been a great decision for us, and it's a good. And plus with my work now with dynamic fitness and strength, one of our biggest schools is Coastal Carolina. So it's only about 40 miles away. So it gives me a chance to do some, post-installation support and keep the relationship strong. So every time I'm down here for longer than a long weekend, I try to go visit the staff, and which I'll be going there tomorrow. So it kind of works out good from a work standpoint and a chance to get away from home base, because I'm not sure. I mean, I know you have your gym, but this is really the first time in my career I've been out of like university, professional, or team-based coaching twice in my 32-year coaching career. But the first time out, I subletted some space and was still coaching, so I had somewhere to go to work. In this particular position, I work from the house, so it's good to get out. It's good to get out because I'm not used to that, and I'm still trying to learn how that works. I've learned to respect a lot of being in the private sector. I respect anyone who's sustainably winning with a brick and mortar gym, because it's very, very hard. And I subletted when I was out because I wanted to be fluid, and I had no relationships in the area. And as you know, starting cold and investing in, whether it's a lease or if you buy a building outright, man, you're swinging from the fences, and I appreciate anybody who has a leap of faith. But, so this time around, I don't have that. So it's a lot different this time around.
Yeah, we're looking at moving to Tennessee here pretty soon, and not having any footholds down there. It is a leap of faith. Just are people going to show up? And it's a lot different than when I started it here, and we already had a good base before we opened up the business itself. But so is it down Coastal Carolina? Is that more down by Wilmington?
No, opposite. So Coastal Carolina is actually in South Carolina, going closer to in that Myrtle Beach area.
Okay.
Ocean Isle is still North Carolina. We're about 40 miles south of Wilmington, and we're literally, 30 miles north of Myrtle Beach. So we're like, I know, this, obviously with COVID but generally in the summer, like one of our favorite things to go down here is to drive down to Myrtle Beach to the House of Blues and catch some of the concerts. Sometimes they're the older bands. Sometimes they're cover bands that actually sound just as good. So there's a lot of things like anybody. You want to enjoy some successes, and you want to have a fulfilled life, and everybody's had the challenges this year to figure out how to stay positive under some crazy times.
Yeah, it's been are you kind of happy you're not working with a pro team right now with all the restrictions? I talked to Marcus, and he had no idea what was going on right up until I think July, before he knew what he was going to be doing with his athletes.
Yeah, I actually talked to Evan too during that time. I look at it this way: like my former assistant is working at a private facility, and like I told him, again, everybody's at different points in their career. I mean, I'm past halftime, right? Like I'm looking at collecting pension in 10 years and retirement and what's that look like. But I still think I'm very active, and I still think I have a lot to offer if something were to happen down the road. I don't know that I'm enjoying what I'm doing now, learning a lot. Whatever happens, I've learned a lot this past 9 months doing what I'm doing. And we've assembled a great team to try to put a lot of name recognition into an up and coming company. But my buddy was like, we were talking about, hey, if you are really a coach now who's in that position of, you had to sit out this year, especially in football, right? Man, you may need to plan for a 2-year deal because jobs may not spin as they do usually because of finances. Well, they've already fired 2 coaches in the NFL, so billionaire owners in the NFL are probably a lot different than trying to find boosters to give you money to buy out a college head coach for $10 million. So for me, I'm in a position where, hey man, I'm cool, but my assistant, he needs to keep his heads open to see what's available. So I told him, you better be prepared. Maybe you might have a little bit longer stay in the private sector. And then he even said, man, with all these issues, it probably is a good year to sit out. And I think that's a yes and no answer. Like, depending on how you look at it. Like, for me, I like to think that I was good at structure, organization, and problem solving, right? So I would have taken it on as a huge challenge of what my expertise and what we do could help benefit the organization. But then it's because there was so much that was unavailable, like the information that was being unavailable, the things that were close to the lip, like talking to some of these coaches, they knew nothing. Like, it was, you're not coming in. They're not coming in. There was no specific dates that they could work on because everything was changing daily, right? And then, good, better, or worse, we live in the greatest country in the world, right? We're freedoms and all that comes into play. But with that, also, to me, comes some things that have to be questioned. Like, it wasn't even that there was differences in the state, what was going on with this pandemic. And it's serious business, regardless of what you believe. It's serious. The numbers say it's serious. And I know people can throw different sciences out to show you not only is COVID making people sick, but because of what COVID has done from a societal, what's the suicide rates looking like, right? What's depression looking like? Yeah. What's the education of my granddaughter who's in the 2nd grade looking like? There's so many trickle-down effects to this that it makes you really aware of, like, hey, what's going on? And then we're trying to promote athletics and sports, and let's face it, it's for money, right? Let's face it, it's about money. Yeah. They had to field something to get money. So the critical things about us was, it wasn't even state, man. It's like county laws. Like, what we're doing in Forsyth County from COVID ramifications is different than Davie County, Mecklenburg County. It's really weird. Like, you can go from a different county in our area and people. So I think that hurt us. Like, not having, like here's the thing. Like, here's the national standard, right? Here's the 5 bullet points. Regardless of what the state government says, these 5 things have to be affecting everyone's state. And then if there's specific outbreaks, like New York, right? At the early on, New York was crazy. I have a lot of friends that still live in New York. My sister's very much in contact. The things she was telling me that were happening in New York, well, now you've got to be a little bit more aggressive. And all that comes into play when you're thinking about bringing these kids back, right? Because what if guys on your team are in New York doing their training, right? What if guys are in California, then getting them back? And then there's the different states now. It's changed a little bit, but different states now. If you go out of state, it's 12-day quarantine, 10-day quarantine, 14. So I think that although it would have been extremely challenging, I would have been okay with at least trying to be in that think pot of figuring things out. I think those discussions, although it may never happen again in our lifetime, but because it's happened, hopefully the NFL pools what everybody did, like anything else, to be prepared for when it happens again. Because something's going to happen again. It's COVID-19. That means this thing has happened 18 other times. before it got to 19.
Yeah, it's hopefully it'll be some kind of learning experience. You know, you look at this as kind of a dry run for something bigger to come. I was reading Dan Carlin had a book out, and I was reading it right before this whole thing hit. It was called "The End Is Always Near," and here you're reading about these pandemics, and he's saying, you know, we're due to have one of these. And I finished the book, and a week later, this all hit. Really bad. But reading that book, you realize it could be worse, and hopefully we'll learn some stuff from it and be able to pivot better next time.
Yeah, it will be real interesting to see, because here's my concerns. My concerns aren't necessarily with the professionals. It's with some of the rules of the colleges have come out with. And, you know, like some of these Division I teams, they played a 4-game non-conference schedule, some money games in the fall, and they're eligible to come back in the spring and play a conference schedule. And then you're going to try to play so you're going to play, whether it's a 4-game schedule, a conference-only schedule, or a full schedule, it's still 3 preparation periods for in-season competitive against the opponent season. It doesn't matter how many games there are.
Yeah.
So the ebbs and flows of that, and my concerns weren't necessarily the teams that opted for the spring season. My concern was for those teams, how do you prepare for the following fall season?
Yeah.
And that's where I think these the Power Fives, I think they realized regardless, it's not in anyone's best interest, if you're going to talk player safety with money involved, to go a shortened spring season and piggyback that into trying to do a full slate, because we still don't know what's going to happen then. We still don't know what restrictions are going to be. They're still doing research, and they're still, you know, I haven't kept up on it like probably I should, but generally you can find out on social media how the so-called antiviruses or the vaccines they're trying to work on are going on. I had read some things about a month earlier and haven't seen any updates from that. So you don't know where this is going. And, you know, and I have a vested interest in college spring sports, because my son was fortunate enough to be fortunate enough, I guess. I mean, that's kind of a funny word to use, but he was extended a 6th year because he missed his final outdoor season of track and field. And he parlayed that into transferring to a larger school with better coaching. And I'll say that out loud, better coaching. And it's a better program. And he's banking on them having an outdoor season for him to fulfill his college dreams and aspirations as an athlete. Academically, he's already one master's degree in. So he's exceeded expectations in a short period of time. This is a true bonus year before him, because he had specific goals that he wanted to try to accomplish before his athletic career as a college athlete was over last year. And this is the biggest reason why he's going to a 6th year and investing in a student loan and taking out loans he wants to see what this college experience has for him to offer. And luckily for him, he was a good enough thrower through a lot of help of a lot of people. One we know, Judd Logan, was instrumental in him becoming a very, very good thrower. And as with Adrian Wilson, she was his high school coach, and she always stuck by him. So we've been fortunate, because of my role in strength and conditioning and performance, to meet people. You know, Bert Soren connected that whole thing for us. I mean, who knows where my son would be athletically if I knew Bert was a competitive thrower. I knew Bert because of the way our businesses work. I called Bert and said, Bert, do you do any private coaching? Because my son's a 9th grader and he's not getting coached. And plus, Bert's only 90, let's just say 2 hours away. So I could get to Columbia to train. If he could do it, I would have drove down there and trained. He said, I don't, but Adrian Wilson's here. And I didn't know it was Adrian Blewett, right? Because I met Adrian when she was training with John Godina when John was just starting the World Throws team out of Arizona State and API, when Dave Dumbo was the throw coach, those guys were training in our weight room. So I had met Adrian a while back, and when I said, I know Adrian. So then through Adrian, you get hooked up with Judd. And then I met Judd for the very first time at one of the Summer Strongs. And that's where that connection went. And he's been I couldn't have asked for a better relationship to be created through him and my son. I mean, he treated Peter like he was a adjunct Ashland athlete. Yeah. And Peter will give him a tremendous amount of credit for what he was. I mean, he and Peter threw it. You would have thought Pete was part of the team. The way his athletes embraced Peter, and that was a great thing moving forward, because again, Peter went from, begging to be a walk-on at App to leaving on a full scholarship. And a lot of it's because of Adrian and Judd and those relationships, and the fact that they were willing to help a guy who needed help.
Yeah, I'm 40 minutes from Ashland. I started going down there when I first started coaching athletes when I was 21, 22. And I mean, the amount of people that I've met through Judd just kind of adopting me and saying, okay, here's this dumb 21-year-old kid. I'm going to put up with his nonsense and just see where he goes. And I mean, Adrian was down there. I think she was a freshman, when I was down there. And it was just the amount of people I've met through him and through Ashland, and we're all kind of part of this adopted Ashland family that we all know each other and have these like tree limbs that go out. And my son goes down there now, and I took him down as a 7th grader, I think, to one of their camps and said, well, if you can just learn to do a nice standing throw as a 7th grader, we'll be great. I come back 4 hours later and he's doing a full rotational spin with the shot. Okay.
Yeah. Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I was trying to think back too, when you talk about like the everybody's intertwined, and when you had reached out to me, I'm trying to remember, what year was it that I first met you, when it was you and KO? What was that clinic at? It was Louis was speaking. It was somewhere in Tennessee, right? Or Georgia Tech or somewhere.
It was in Nashville. What's the school down there?
Oh, Vanderbilt. It was at Vanderbilt.
And we went down there, and it was you and Louis giving a seminar for $75.
Yeah, I was like, that's right, because I was like, I think that was the first time I met. I don't know if it was the first time I met KO, but it was definitely the first time I met you.
Yep.
And I was like, can't even remember what year that was. I think it had to be when I was at Arizona State still, I think.
I think so too. It was we were amazed that, $75, we're there. So we went down there. It was funny because we had been to West Side one time, just kind of watch Louis do his thing. And we went through the hotel lobby, and Louis sitting in this couch, and people were coming up shaking his hand, and Louis doesn't want any part of this.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't know me and Carrie, but he recognized our faces. So he kind of like lit up when he saw us, and we went over and we kind of rescued him and said, hey, Louis, you want to go to dinner? Our treat, we'll take you out. So we take Louis out, and Louis, anywhere you want to go, we're in Nashville. You tell us, we're buying dinner for you and Doris, whatever you want. Louis says, hey, I've never been to Hooters.
I know why he wanted to go to Hooters.
Yeah. So we sat down in Hooters, and he gave us like he never shut up the whole time, which was great. Yeah. He gave us a 3-hour seminar in Hooters for.
Well, and it's funny because they say some of the most, it's like anything else, right? When you go to a clinic, you learn more outside the clinic talks. And from what I can gather, just listening to stories from Dave Tate and them, they solved a lot of training problems at those breakfasts at Bob Evans every day.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about that's team stuff, right? And I think he enjoyed the camaraderie of it. And, and you watch West Side versus the World, I think some people, he doesn't come off. Sometimes it doesn't look like he's coming off in the right light, but you are who you are. And I give the guy credit. He's not changed.
No, he's stuck to his guns, and he is who he is for sure. How did you so what was your first gig as a strength coach? How did you get into this?
Well, it's funny because I got indoctrinated with weights, more so through my dad, because my dad played at Lawrence High School in New York. Its most famous football player is Lyle Alzado, who was he was 2 years younger than my dad, or 3. And when my dad was in school, a couple of guys ahead of him, one was named Rich Marlowe, who wound up being my high school coach, and one was Sal Champy, who wound up being one of the most successful high school football coaches in the history of Long Island football at East Islip. He wound up playing at Purdue, and my coach, Rich Marlowe, played at Virginia Tech. And early on, my dad wasn't necessarily a weight room type of guy, but he knew it was important. He also knew it was important for me, because when Mr. Marlowe took over the high school head coach, we had one of the first organized weightlifting programs. Like, you didn't lift, you didn't play. It was one of those deals. Like, it was just the way it was. And that was early 80s. That was unheard of, right?
Right.
So we had weights. My dad had put a bunch of weights together in our basement. And it's funny, man, because now that I'm kind of on this kick of historic things and weights, my dad had some York Stamp standard barbell 50-pound plates and some things. I'm like, mother effer, man. What if I only knew. And so I kind of got introduced unofficially early on. Like, I lifted in the garage early teens with the DiNapoli brothers, who their dad pretty much, and them two convinced my dad to let me start playing organized football before my dad wanted me to. The Pop Warner team of the midget football club in the area, the Inwood Buccaneers, my dad actually played on the very first team in 1956. But he didn't want to rush me for whatever reasons he was, and maybe because I was bigger, because the first year I played, I was 9 years old and started on the 13-year-old team. And I was always younger anyway, because I was an October kid. And back then, they didn't really have separation dates. I should have probably been a year behind. So I started my first high school football game at 13 years old in the 10th grade. When I went to college, I was the youngest guy on the team when I got to college at Wake. So I kind of got introduced, but the biggest thing was my dad knew when it was time that the weight room was legit, because Rich Marlowe was running the football program at Lawrence. And as I kind of was just dibble-dabbled, I pretty much really started ninth grade. Our ninth grade in my high school was junior high school, so I wasn't up at the high school. But then once football season was over, my dad, numerous jobs he did. One was he drove the school bus in the afternoon, sanitation in the morning, school bus afternoon, and one of the top bouncers and doormen in Long Island at night. So my dad is an original PhD of the streets, made sure I didn't have to be that. In some respects, it's great. In other respects, I kind of wish he would have gave me a little bit more, because I'm not I can't fight. You don't want me to fight, because you don't want me on your team. You're not going to win. But yet my son, who's really never been to New York, is 100% like my dad.
Yeah.
Will fight you in a minute, glassy-eyed, like, I don't care, I'll take the punishment type of guy. And then my youngest, Peter, is like me. So it's kind of skipped around. But so going into high school, I saw what organized programming looked like. Didn't know it, but I knew that, hey, when we went in, there were certain things we were doing. And it was kind of a combination of what my coach had learned at Virginia Tech, and it had some of that Penn State one set to failure, which I would learn to come, called HIT work.
Yeah.
And then another famous legend went to my high school too in the strength world, is Dr. Kenn. He actually went to school. Again, he was in that Lyle Alzado year. So those guys were a few years younger than my dad and my high school football coach. So a lot of cool things intertwined out of Lawrence. I was fortunate that our high school was legit. Like, we were one of the best programs in Long Island. And even though the population has decreased, it's still one of the top winning. It might be the winningest program in Long Island as far as overall wins. And we were exposed to a lot of good stuff. And my dad, because he played with my high school coach, he had some access. So I really figured things out, because as I was coming up, we had some really good football players. And on Saturdays, my dad would take me up to the high school, and Mr. Marlowe, which I called him Mr. Marlowe, the coach. There was a big offensive lineman, Peter Antonelli, who wound up going to Maryland on full scholarship. That was 6 or 7 years older than me. And they would open it up on Saturdays for Peter to work out one-on-one. And that's when I kind of learned, like, hey, if you want to be good and you want to get out of Inwood, it takes more than what they're asking you to do.
Yeah.
And I think from that standpoint, it kind of ingrained something in me where I love where I came from. Everybody stays there. I wasn't staying in Inwood, and I prefer not to stay in New York. And the only way I'm getting out is a scholarship. Yeah. I think my mom and dad could have figured out a way to get me to school, but I had already made up my mind. If I don't get no scholarship, I'll just go work on the sanitation with my dad. I'm not going to junior college and up then at that time, Nassau Community College, which was right up the road, was one of the top junior college football playing teams in the nation. But it was either full ride, it's for free, it's for me, or I'll be like the rest of the really good football players in Lawrence, and just sometimes it doesn't work out. Academically, I would have been okay to get into college, which I was, but to piggyback into that. So I saw organization of strength easy. I liked it. I saw progress. I needed it because I wasn't as gifted as a lot of the players on my team. My junior year, when we won the championship, there was at least 12 guys better that I would say were better football players than I was. And out of those 12, only 2 of them got Division I scholarships for various reasons. And then I would have been the one that also made it. But talent-wise, I had to outwork and had to do all the little things. I couldn't miss weights. I couldn't miss the runs, where some of those other dudes, they could do handstand walks before they were popular in CrossFit, muscle ups. They could have done muscle ups in 1980. We just thought that was badass. Now it's, come the rite of passage. So I learned early on, and then, luckily for me, I got numerous scholarship offers. I am very fortunate to say I chose where I went to school. I didn't have the choice made for me because I only had a scholarship offer here or there. I was very diligent in making a choice that I thought was best for me and my future, because like anything else, I'm going to the league, right? Who isn't going to the league?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what year you are. Doesn't matter how good you are. Everybody thinks they're going to the league, right?
Yeah.
So I chose Wake Forest for a lot of different reasons. None of it academic. It was all based off of how fast could I play, how fast could I start, and I'm going to the league. Yeah. Fortunately for me, I could handle the academic workload because it's very challenging there, and it all worked out the way it was supposed to. But during that time, I get redshirted my first year. I'm spending all my time in the weight room, right? That spring, I blow my knee out. ACL, MCL. You don't want to do that in the 80s.
Right, yeah.
and I did it. So here I am as a freshman, got a chance to be a 4-year starter. Now I'm going to miss the entire year. And now all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, shoot, I got to graduate now, right? Yeah. School takes on a whole different meaning. It becomes the end game. Yeah. Because I knew Alzado and I knew what my dad had to say about it. I knew my high school coach. I knew what I wanted. Now, all of a sudden, you get hurt. Now, I got to graduate because that might be the only thing I got in 4 years. Yeah. So it changes the whole mindset. I go through rehab, have to have a second surgery the following spring. I'm not going to get into that. It's a crazy story. I get back to playing, got a chance to play a few games. I'm getting ready to earn my starting spot back that I would have had a year before. We're up at Army. I'm from New York. I got 50 people in the stands. I blow out my other knee. So now a 4-year starting career, I've only played in 5. I wound up playing in 5 games my first 3 years. So what am I doing, man? I'm spending all my time in the weight room.
Yeah, yeah.
And a good rapport with my college strength coach to this day. He's a dear friend of mine. And I'm kind of learning this deal. And, and at that time, oh, I'm going to major in business. I'm going to major in economics. And I'm like, man, I don't want to do any of that. And then I'm watching, and then I'm like, man, this guy's just in the weight room. He's lifting weights, and then he's teaching us how to lift weights, and then he's watching people lift weights. I want to do this, right? Like, I love this stuff. I loved it more than when it was all said and done because of my injury background. I loved it more than I loved playing, because back then the science and the understanding of how important in-season training wasn't as it is now. And regardless of whether we had an in-season program or not, you came out of the season with a detriment in strength levels.
Yeah.
Now you don't see that as much, because I think as strength coaches we've learned the most uninterrupted time of the year to train is the in-season.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to find ways to manipulate volumes and intensities. So I called it aggressive retention, because I wanted to try to find ways to get them stronger, but without the muscle soreness and without the fuel required to be a detriment for them on game day.
Right.
And it's a weird, it's an interesting game, because there's science, but then there's practicality and what your gut tells you, like how much is too much, especially because different positions require different things in the NFL. Like an offensive lineman's going to play 80 snaps. A defensive lineman's playing half, because of the platoon systems that occurs at this level. Except for offensive linemen, everybody's a specialist.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's very, very interesting when you're coaching football, even on the college level, how this game's played. It seems like now with up-tempo offenses in college, to me, from a recruiting standpoint, they're hard enough to find defensive linemen anyway. Well, if you're a four-man front, you need 8 quality linemen to play every game. And I've been fortunate enough to go watch Wake Forest play a couple of live games this year, and I've seen it. They've got one of the best defensive linemen in the country, but they're rotating that dude out. They run 4 in, 4 out a lot of times, 3 in, 3 out, and then on a big play they might say, you got to stay in. Yeah. We need you. But he's not playing a full game. So you have to figure out the coolness of it. And that's kind of how I fell into coaching. I started spending way more time in the weight room with my strength coach. Then I started doing internships, because I majored in health and sports science. Then in the summers, I worked for him. My last 2 summers, before summer training was huge, I stayed my last 2 summers and was able to work in the weight room during the summer months for minimum wage. So I would go in, train, do my classwork, and then I would, because we were open to the public too, because we had tennis court. It's like I said, back then it was a lot different.
Yeah.
So we would be open till like 8 or 9 at night. So I'd work the night shift. And so I wound up doing that. And then it just, at the end of my career, I knew I was a medical reject. I was already told that by the trainers. They pulled me in at the end of the year and was like, look, man, I don't know what you're thinking, but a lot of these teams have already negated you as a medical reject based off your injuries. I said, fine, you saved me a lot. I'm going to coach.
Yeah.
And my first coaching job was at Pinecrest Prep, a preparatory school in Fort Lauderdale. And I appreciate high school coaches. I never wanted to be a high school coach.
Yeah.
I just felt like, for me, college was it, with a possible aspiration of the NFL because of the football thing. Like, everybody's going to fall into, if you're a strength coach, depending on the sport you played, I think that's how you fall into it. Most people fall into football, but if you're a basketball guy, you probably have some aspirations to be an NBA guy. Yeah. If it comes, right? It's tough. People forget, like, oh man, I want to be an NFL coach. So does everyone else, and there's only 32 jobs in the whole world. You're talking about one of the most elitist positions in all of employment.
Wow.
There's
Yeah.
32 jobs of them. And that's why when my tenure with the Panthers was over, everybody said, oh, House, I'm sorry. I said, don't be sorry for me. I coached 9 years
Right.
in the NFL and at my dream job.
Yeah.
So I'm cool. Like, don't trip. I know what I signed up for.
Sure.
I know how business is. I'm not one of these guys that, oh, I did my job. It was the coaching staff, right? I'm on that coaching staff.
Yeah.
We didn't get it done. They made a decision. My contract wasn't renewed. They weren't going to extend me, and they weren't going to keep me on. Okay, cool. What's the next journey in my life? So the Pinecrest deal worked out well because one of our former GAs at Wake was there, and I didn't have to teach. They had dormitories, so I was getting married. You had to be married for the position. So we were dorm parents. So I worked the dorm with my wife, and then I wind up coaching. And when I was the strength coach and offense defensive line coach for the football team, I never wanted to coach football.
Right.
I never wanted to coach on the grass because even at that early point of whether I thought I could coach or not, I felt I had more to offer the team working with everyone rather than 10 to 15 offensive linemen and building a rapport that way. I still think I could be a hell of a head football coach, but I didn't want to have to go through that whole rigmarole or whatever you want to call it to be a head football coach. I felt my best impact on a football team could be through the weight room. One, because I didn't want to coach the grass. Two, I love that stuff. And three, the impact you could have on the entire program is far greater. There's some great position coaches. Hell, 2 position coaches that coach me. I stand here today because of what they did for me. My high school position coach, I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for him because he gave me the skills to get a scholarship. Yeah. So it all comes back to football for me. But the craziest thing is I'm sure we've all had these times of anxiety and these questioning your capabilities. So from 1986 to the time I graduated, December of 88, for 2.5 years, I'm all in. I'm going to be a strength coach, right? I'm going to be a coach. Whoop, 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 whoop. Well, now you walk out for that first day to coach kids, and now you're thinking, damn, man, can you coach? Like, what happens if they don't respond? What happens if you don't have what you thought you had?
Right. Yeah.
And luckily it hit right on, and it's gone pretty good for me ever since. So, during my college career, like I said, I didn't really have I didn't go into it like my youngest son, Peter, he went into college right away knowing he wanted to be a strength coach.
Yeah.
So the plan's totally different, right? He already knows he's majoring in exercise science. He goes to App State because they got one of the top undergraduate exercise science / strength and conditioning type programs in the nation. And then he had the opportunity to be a Division I athlete, which, do you need to be an athlete to be a strength coach? Not so much in this era. That's changed.
Yeah.
My era, it was highly valuable because it gives you instant credibility before you could. My son used a little bit. I'm not big into the fake it till you make it stuff, but that credibility of being a Division I athlete gives you the affordability that those athletes at least recognize what they're going through.
Yeah.
Then as you're learning the X's and O's of how to coach, program design, exercise technique, they just know that, hey man, this guy's been there. Like when I got the job and started working at Boise State, they were still a 1AA school.
Right.
And I can't remember how many football players would go, hey man, we'll do whatever you tell us. I go, you don't even know if I know anything. You play D1. Like, it's just little things that matter.
Yeah.
Just like everything is perception. I'm an ex-O lineman. I don't look anything like a speed coach. But yet I teach a guy who looks like a speed coach, and he says the same thing that I say, and the fast guys are going to look towards him.
Sure.
Because he runs fast. That's just the way it is. It's not bad, good, or indifferent. It's just that's how people, that's human nature, right?
Yeah.
They're going to look at me like, oh, this guy can get you strong. And they're going to look at him and say, this guy can get me fast, but realistically, I'm teaching that guy everything he's telling you.
Yes.
So you learn. These are things you learn. You don't take it personal. It's just the way it is. That's why I always tell, when you tell coaches and trying to give them little hints, and most people probably know this now, is you never want to hire yourself. You already have that personality on your staff. You've got to bring other people that give different types of opinions, different personalities, because your reach, as much as you want to think you're going to reach everybody, it can't be done.
Yeah.
Who on your staff can help you bridge gaps? I've had that happen only a handful of times. I think my percentage is pretty good, but when it's not good, you got to have those types of people that can do things in your vision, but with the personality and the relationships that allow it to flow better, so that the success of the program is ahead of the success, whether or not I've got to be the guy or not. And a great example of that was with the Panthers. My top assistant worked with Cam Newton one-on-one.
Yeah.
I mean, me and Cam, I respect Cam, hard-working dude, one of the hardest working guys we had, tough as nails. What that guy absorbs on Sundays, it's not fun.
Yeah.
Don't care how big you think he is. People are going after Cam Newton because he's Cam Newton.
Yeah.
But the relationship that he established with Jason and the way they work together, I didn't need to be all in their face. We were winning because they were winning.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, if that's working and I can let that thing be a separate entity and I can worry about other things, all I know is my quarterback's in here working his ass off.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And people know it. Now, did he train like the other quarterbacks? No, our quarterbacks all train based off their relationship to the weight room. And I always say, I respect guys who love the weight room, but I don't want my quarterbacks loving the weight room that much, because generally they're not very good quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I'd rather them be worried about going out flinging the rock, and we figure out a program that they understand is necessary for them to be protected and to keep them on the field. But I don't need a guy to come in there wanting to bang like an old lineman, although it seems cool like when you're in college and stuff. Yeah, I don't need that, man. I need this dude to be the quarterback, so when it's time to go, he's ready to work and show the team what's up. Now, I don't want him to be that quarterback who doesn't think he has to come in the weight room at all either.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that happens a lot of times too. And I think that's one thing that I think Cam, the longer we were together, I think he more and more realized it was just him being in there working his ass off, and people seeing that he was having a good time but working hard resonated, rather than him being a quarterback who might have came in there and did a few things and hit the bricks.
Yeah.
I think that helped him. And that's those things you learn as a coach. So the progression of coaching is hard, again, because, like I go back to when I started, like with my son, Peter, I'm like, okay, man, this guy wants to be a strength coach. Is he going all in? Can he handle himself on the floor? And luckily for him, because he knew early, we've been able to expose him to a lot of good situations where he has a lot more practical coaching experience on the floor at this point in his career, still in school, than I did. I just coached my teammates. Like, I was held accountable during summer where our coaches were like telling guys, you got to train with Big Joe, and then telling me you're responsible for these dudes. If they ain't in shape, that's on you.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm like, okay, it's going down like that. So it's interesting how everybody can tell you their story, right? How they started. I started by the fact that I was a college football player.
Yeah.
Now I talk to these kids, and they're kids to me, right? Where they just got into exercise science and physiology, and you're like, well, what's your athletic background? I have none. And back when I started, you got no shot.
Right.
Because once I'm not even looking, like, early on in the early 90s, the first thing you looked at is where'd you play, right? Now it's so crazy. And then the way the career pattern has changed, it's so much more diverse now. There's so much more to being we'll just call it strength and conditioning. I know there's a lot of ways to call it. To get into strength and conditioning than there ever was.
Yeah.
You have the private sector now. Like, there's always somebody before somebody else, but it's that one person who like puts it on the map. Like, they call Boyd Epley the godfather of strength and conditioning, and I think he's earned that. But how many, you had the Alvin Roys, right?
Yeah.
Bob Ward and guys like that were before him, doing it way before him.
Right.
But yet Boyd put it on the map, and he exploited the notoriety of Nebraska football at that time, that he created a career that was only sprinkled around. And then, several decades later, there was the Mike Boyles of the world, the Lawrence Seagraves, the Chip Smiths, right? But the truth was, Mark Verstegen and his vision of what private sector professional or elite athlete coaching looked like blew up a market that now is to me, has so much credibility, especially dealing in professional sports, that that is not personal training. That's private sector coaching.
Right.
If you work in that type of domain, you're a private sector coach. Stop allowing your kid to call you my trainer.
Yeah, right.
Because to me, that's different.
Yeah.
Like when I was taking resumes in the 90s, if it said you were a personal trainer, you had no shot.
Yeah.
But now if I get a resume that says you work at Exos, you work at IMG, you work at D1, you work at anything that's any type of private sector performance facility, there's a lot of credibility into that.
Right.
Especially at the professional level, because a lot of times those guys spend more time with them than the professional strength coaches.
Sure.
So it's really changed. And then high school strength and conditioning, generally, and even some states are still in this matter, but it's still become an important role. How many states now, strength coach only, excuse me. They're not the assistant football coach, right? They're not the football coach just taking another stipend so he can make more money and then just opening the weight room and throwing a program out there. There's legitimate high school strength and conditioning positions that can compare to college strength and conditioning positions, especially in, some of the private schools in the Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio that I know of.
Yeah.
What some of those guys are getting paid salary-wise, it's a pretty good gig.
Yeah, we got a couple of them from the Columbus area on the show, and you go down there, and their weight rooms, Sorinex, everything, wall to wall, most amazing weight rooms I've ever seen. And these coaches, they know their stuff, man. And it's I am hoping to see more and more of the professional strength coach coming into these high schools instead of he lifted weights in high school, so you go ahead and work with the team.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not a great deal. Sometimes it works out, but you want somebody in there who's got some real passion for that, I think.
Well, like you said, I mean, like in your area, like I know in the Wisconsin, Minnesota area, our equipment is dominating high schools with, like you said, $500,000-$600,000 budgets for high school weight rooms.
Yeah.
If you're going to invest that kind of money in high quality equipment, you need to invest the high quality money in somebody running that room.
Yeah.
And not having to do something else.
Yeah.
That's 100% investment to protecting those athletes who come in there. It's really, again, it's giving people more opportunities to earn a living in this career where it was very, very isolated early on.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just more to offer. Oh man, I really want to be a college strength coach. Okay, great. But if you're open, there's quality jobs across many different genres of physical fitness now. And that's the thing that I see as the positive is the growth and the importance that it's becoming more aware at all levels. And now, and again, now what it comes down to is how well can you educate parents who want to be in a position to tell you, the expert, how to train their sons. And I know you being in the private sector, me venturing, it's different in college and pros or high schools where you're getting paid your salary regardless of what the clientele number is.
Yeah.
In
Right.
private sector, you need those people to pay you your money. So how much of your integrity are you willing to stray from when you're making decisions on how to train kids? I lost a lot of money because I wasn't going to view from my processes, regardless of what these people thought they needed. You don't know what they need.
Yeah, it's, we work with a lot of young athletes at our place, and I deal with a multi-million-dollar sports performance place just down the road. But, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I know kids need to hinge, squat, press, lift odd objects, heavy carries. They need to be able to run a mile, the basic stuff. And it's really hard to sell that to parents when they can put them on high-speed treadmills and all this stuff. But that's what, we've got Malcolm Majeski coming to the gym this weekend to basically give a seminar to parents and coaches in the area that, hey, I'm a strength coach. This is what I'm seeing. This is what these kids need to be able to do when they get to me. And I'm not a phys ed teacher, and a lot of these kids can't do basic things like jump rope.
Oh, some of them can't skip.
Yeah.
I think, and that was my issue. Like when we created the Block Zero it's grown into the middle school and beginning, but Block Zero was created because the college freshman was dog doo-doo when they came in. As they guy could bench 400, couldn't do a back extension hold for 30 seconds.
Yep.
Couldn't do a posterior shoulder iso hold for 30 seconds with a 2.5 plate. So it's only a matter of time before this dude gets hurt, right?
Yeah.
Can't touch his toes. Quarter squat 600, but can't body weight squat full depth.
Right.
So we created this plan, and again, a lot of it is confidence, right? In 1996, I knew we were wrong. I knew it. We were training everybody on the same programming, so somebody loses.
Yeah.
Well, at that point in time, the young group, the freshmen, lost because the program was being written for the people who were already here. Yeah. And I knew it in 96, but didn't do anything about it until the early 2000s when I felt I had enough confidence and enough high-level respect behind my name and what we were doing to finally say, enough is enough. We're not doing this right.
Yeah.
We're not doing a service to what we say we want to do. Like, I always go back to the generalizations of the hypocrisy of strength and conditioning. From the time I've been in it, what's the number one thing you want to do? Prevent injury. But then what's the second thing you're doing as a strength coach? Maxing new athletes you never know of because you think you need their number to write the program. Yeah. I'm like, that's what's your name again? Did you even get your physical? Let's go see what you can squat, right? So, and now again, a lot of it's changed, but that's what we were exposed to. And that was the norm. So you didn't know any different. I'd like to think that I've been an innovator on a lot of that stuff in the college levels because we and the people who work for me, we just saw it more globally than tunnel vision. Like, what are we really supposed to be doing here? And that became challenges. Again, like everybody asked me about the tier system, how did it start? Because my name is tied to football for this generation of people. Yeah. This generation doesn't understand. I'm not a football strength coach without Boise State women's basketball, Boise State gymnastics, Boise State volleyball, Boise State track and field, Boise State tennis. I was an Olympic strength coach.
Yeah.
And inadvertently, the program model that I use today and has been popularized around the world was based on not necessarily a challenge to me, But a specific comment that our women's basketball coach at the time, June Doherty, had said when I first started meeting with her when I got the job at Boise is, and so for us, my thought was, good point taken. And because Coach Thompson had given me creative freedom with the Olympic sports, when I got there, I was able to be creative and just started thinking about different things on training that I believed, different things that I had learned, 3-day versus 4-day, right? The split versus the whole body. What made more sense in athletics? My college strength coach was an HIT, full body strength and conditioning coach. Most everybody else was 4-day splits with some Olympic variations. And back then it was even to the point where it was so dissected that if you said you lifted 3 days a week, you were machines. And if you lifted 4 days a week, you were free weights. That's how crazy it was when I started.
Yeah.
So you start piecemealing everything together. You start learning more about different things, and you come up with a plan that looks more like, again, I call it athletic-based strength training because it's not heavily dominated on one of the strength disciplines. Early on, a lot of the programming that was being written was very dominated by one of 3 strength disciplines based off what the strength coach's philosophy was. Yeah. If you liked Olympic lifts, your program looked a lot like an Olympic lifting program. If you like powerlifting, it looked like that. If you happen to bring in a guy who knew bodybuilding, it looked like that. Yeah. And because it was somewhat organized, the progress was still benefiting athletes. Sure. But as things became to grow, in my opinion, you can't train a sport with a sport. Yeah. Because there are limiting factors in all 3 of those strength disciplines when it comes to the encompassing metrics that need to be in athletics. Yeah. Like you need to be explosive, so you need Olympic lifting. You need slow strength, so you need powerlifting. You need lean body mass, so you need bodybuilding. So all these exercises and all these sets and rep schemes we were already using. It was just how do you formulate it so it doesn't look like a typical weightlifting program. And that's kind of how we came about, or the evolution of the tier system was, I believed in whole body training. Like it made sense to me. This isn't science background. This is just logistic background, right? If you're a thrower, you're using your entire body to throw. Yeah. Well, then why would I split the body up if I'm training an athlete? Makes sense in powerlifting because the genres are broken up. But even like in Olympic lifting, they train the total body movements every day. Yeah. They just
The football program is for powerlifting is, they train everything every day, you're squatting, benching, deadlifting.
So I looked at it from that, and then I looked at it from metabolic demands in sport and what coaches would tell you they were looking for from your strength and conditioning program. And football coaches were always the most dominant. We need to be explosive in the fourth quarter, right? We need to be in better shape than everybody in the fourth quarter. But every coach is saying that in some way, right? Volleyball, we need to be explosive and conditioned in the 5th set. Yeah. We have to be able to maintain our jumping ability, right? But yet, when you look at it from when you're designing these programs and you're thinking the sport, but you're thinking weightlifting, and you're not combining the thought process of the two. You just went back to what you were always told in weightlifting, right? Train the fast movements first before you fatigue. Yeah. Yep. Big accessory strength movements, and then your secondary and isolative work accessory to finish. And that's all fine and well in lifting. Yeah. But how do you measure power? And again, I know these are like misnomer words and people don't like to use them, but like power capacity or power endurance, if you're consistently training the fast exercises at the beginning of a training session. And because the truth is there are no set terms on how to train athletes in the weight room, you're not messing with science, because there's nothing out there. Everything that's being written is based off of protocols from the 3 strength genres when they do the research. They're not researching the things that need to be researched on. Like, obviously, I want to think that we've been fairly successful at all levels with this type of programming. And all we were doing was manipulating exercises that had a power or explosive component at different points in the session to see if we can elicit responses under fatigue.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I was trying to do it 90% full clean, the 5th exercise of the day. It was to do some type of explosive movement to see if they can elicit an explosive response from a metabolic standpoint in a session, because I looked at it from energy systems. And that was some of the things that I wanted to bring into the weight room. And that's why, like, when I write cycles, I try to base the training cycle in the weight room on the running volume of the longer duration type of sprint or tempo work. That's going to happen in the conditioning plan, not the sprint plan, but I'm talking about the conditioning sessions. So if you believe in gassers and 300-yard shuttles, regardless of the sport, and that, people can debate what your beliefs are on that, you're not going to do sets of 2s at 90% in the weight room.
Right.
You're gonna lean more on 6 to 10 reps, multiple sets, whatever your beliefs are, but you're gonna generally try to mix match. Then when you get to the end of the summer and you're doing like your position specific pattern running, where you may be doing 75 reps and a lot of the yardages are 20 or less, or for offensive linemen might be 5 or less. Well, now you're doing 10 sets of 2 at 88% and things like that. Those are ways to continue to tie in processes. A lot of times you would see guys just running the dog shit out of people all summer and not even worrying about, and then wanting to know why, when the weights were getting heavier, the guys weren't responding.
Right.
So I think you have to look at, there's a lot of things out there. The implementation of GPS has, to me, if you are using it what I determined correctly, there's so much out there with metrics. It's really, it's crazy. It probably take you 6 months just to go through all the metrics that are available and really decipher which ones are important. To me, the one that resonated the most with me, as I look now back on my college conditioning plans, when we didn't even know what GPS was, right? And what we were able to do on a limited basis on the pro level, because we don't have the time with them, was the notion of, when you're in college, coaches, every rep full speed, right? Every rep full speed. And what you find out is that's not the case. It's not the case in games, and it's sure not the case in practice. And I depending on the GPS models you use, ours was termed high speed running. And it was anything over 80% of max velocity or miles per hour, but it also included change of direction, like A cells and D cells. And what you find out is, you're running 3,500 yards of practice, but only 450 of those yards are high speed running. Well, that throws the whole misnomer of run every rep full speed in your conditioning programs. And then even out of that 450 yards, how many of them did they really reach max velocity, or 90%? That's another metric you could look at. So that to me was like, man, if I would have known that. And that's where, again, I'm not an expert in the high-low Charlie Francis model of running, where you have full sprints and then tempo stuff. But that made a little bit more sense to me, because we always think we're always in that submax range, which it looks like we are. But now what was happening when you talk to those Charlie Francis guys, a lot of their problems with some of the longer interval work was that from a conditioning standpoint, the goal times and the rest times were skewed where they put you in a metabolic state that wasn't conducive.
Right.
And now I understand that. The
Yeah.
one thing that I figured out without even knowing that was I had already adjusted all my goal times back for those higher volumes because I wanted them to be successful each rep
Right.
and pace themselves
Yeah.
to be able to finish a conditioning session.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit ahead of the game with manipulating 110 rest times and 300-yard shuttle test time because they weren't at a higher velocity. They were for conditioning.
Right.
But specifically with the GPS, what it told me is, okay, I still need to get this volume of work done in my conditioning, but where do I want to emphasize this 450 yards of high-speed running? Well, that's easy. It's going to come in all my programmable change of direction drills because those are short duration bursts and any position-specific work we did.
Right.
Now, the tempo running and like if I wanted to run a tempo run or if I wanted to run a 300-yard shuttle, I can pull those goal times all the way back.
Yeah.
And I can expand their rest times greater to elicit a more of, hey, I need this for just extra volume and anaerobic conditioning to mimic the long duration of a practice or a game.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that if I were to be in a college situation, that's somewhere where I would need an expert to really help to talk about what I just did and really hone in on what that looks like. Because again, in college, because of the developmental process, to me, those kids still need like set goal times and rest times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pros, they know what they need.
Mm-hmm.
You can do a more untimed tempo run because those guys know.
Right.
They know where they're at, when they're at, and they know if they don't come in shape, they're going to get cut.
Right. Right.
College athletes, you're still teaching them to learn how to do that. And if they're in your program 4 or 5 years, hopefully you've done enough where they can kind of start communicating back to you like I always loved about being in the NFL with professional athletes. The communication level. Velocity-based training. There's a lot of merit to that. I think it's highly overrated in the high school levels. It's like you said, it's the bells and whistles and it's the gimmicks. And maybe you got 1 or 2 kids by the time they're seniors, but half these kids that are using velocity based and you watch them on tape, they don't know how to do the lift right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, it's like, what are you trying to do? You're going with the master carpenter tools with rotten wood.
Yeah, that's a great analogy for it. I first of all, the tier system is so phenomenal for working with any group of people. It was the first book that I bought as a strength coach, and I'm glad I did because it kind of gave me a template how to work with, and I've worked with high schools and in the private sector, and it just gives you. I'm a firm believer in the overall body work, every day too, or every day you're training, but it gives you a template of how to do this correctly and what to emphasize where and how often to hit things. And I give it to young strength coaches all the time. Get this. If you're wondering how to run your weight room and how to get, your freshmen and your seniors, all this, not the same workout, but a good solid workout to get them where they need to be. That's the way to do it is just get that strength coach's handbook and go with the tier system. I'm a big believer.
I appreciate it. And again, I didn't set out to be I think in some ways I changed the game, right? I don't like to say because as it evolved, man, so many people that I had to fortunate opportunity to work with. I don't want to say they worked for me, even though it probably felt sometimes that way working for me, but I really felt we worked together.
Yeah.
And that I was trying to pass on things that, like, I have a lot of strength coaches that are head strength coaches right now that I don't think use the tier system 100%. And they've kind of varied in their own ways, but that's the way I taught them and mentored them. I didn't want to build robots.
Right.
I wanted them to be free thinkers and know that in the end, when it's time for you to make your decisions, that's why we always talked about all the different ways of training. Now, when you worked for me, you were going to write the programs the way I wanted them written. Right. But there was still, like you said, there was so much open creativity because you picked the exercises, you picked what cycles, the terminology had to be the same because we had an intertwining of a lot of staff members, and we wanted to be synonymous with each other because if you had to replace a coach or if you had to take another team over after a year, all the exercise terminology was the same, all the technique was the same, the specific training phases of the year was the same. But if I liked Prilipin and you didn't, I don't care.
Right.
I just want to know that if you tell me you're doing sub-maximal cycle, I know that's between 70 and 85%. Yeah. I don't care how you write it, but I wanted them to know that in the end, when it's time for you to run your show, I hope I've given you the tools that you can make creative decisions, because in the end, the program has to be your own.
There's a lot of room for that. There's a lot of room for creativity within that system, and it lends itself to being able to play with it a little bit and put your own spin on it, for sure.
Well, and that's like I told people, the one thing that I've learned, and I've made several adaptations to it from just the planning of the entire session. The first thing is, I think the way I wrote the book, and that's why I keep trying to write another one and then I get thrown off. And the number one thing that I've been trying to tell people now is, I think too many people think this tier system is based off of the training cycles. Like you hear it all the time. Well, it's undulating. No, that came later.
Right.
Now, in a way, it wound up being undulating before I knew what the hell that meant for a lot of reasons we could talk about. But the truth, and the most simplest thing I can tell you is the tier system is based off of exercise, order, and choice. Because like everybody goes, can I do triphasic with the tier system? Yeah, it's two different things. Yeah. My system's based off of exercise, order, and choice. Triphasic is based off training intensities, right, and manipulating tempo changes and percentages for different phases of training. So if you believe in that, yeah, it'd probably be a pretty good plan. Yeah. But what I want people to understand is the cycling's irrelevant. The cycling helped develop some of the order, but the truth of it is the integrity of the plan is the exercise order template. You can pick whatever you want. Don't mess with the order, because that's what makes it what it is. It's built off of a total body, a lower body, and an upper body movement equals a whole body session. Yeah. That order cannot be manipulated. TLU, LUT, UTL. Don't mess with that.
Right.
Like what you do, if you, and again, I've even come to the conclusion now where in the off season, I was a big 5-tier guy. We tried the 7-tier. It wasn't working. It was better to do specific blocks of stuff, like take posterior chain and neck and make that a separate entity of a tier 5 or a tier 3 program.
Okay.
But now, really looking at some of the things I'm doing personally, some of the things that I was really looking at from the pro model, I don't know now if you just stick to the 3x3 and then the ancillary stuff is all like medleyed and tempoed circuit stuff and emphasizing certain things each day. Like on your squat day, just make that a lower body finishing circuit. Yeah. And then on a total body day, a total body finishing circuit. And then on the upper body day, obviously a cool upper body hypertrophy blast circuit. I think there's some merit in that if you can get what you need in your big three.
Right.
The problem that I go back and forth with is not so much the upper body and the total body stuff. It's the fine correlation of bilateral and then single leg work for lower body.
Right.
Because in 3 tiers, I don't know, depending on the sport and depending on the year of the athlete, like I want to squat you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're an offensive lineman and you're younger, I may want to squat you twice.
Right.
But then that only leads to me having one major single leg movement in a 3-tiered program. That's where I have my issues with that going into the pod system at the end. I think in the pro model, I can do it.
Right.
Because I'm only, regardless, you're only squatting once.
Right.
Very few times am I going to squat you bilaterally twice, even in the NFL. Very few windows of time that happens with the big guys.
Yeah.
The 5 weeks that I had them, we would do a dynamic effort and a front squat for our tier 1. But for the most part, those guys, the single leg stuff and the pseudo single leg stuff that Mike Robinson calls it, and how we broke it down from a exercise classification standpoint. That's my only thing, is how do I get the amount of variable planes of single leg type of work in that model? And that's why the 5-tier works well, because I can plan in place single leg, a lunge variation, a step up variation, a pistol variation. You can really have a nice flow throughout the week on how that stuff works. So but that's for high school, college. Pro, I think I could get away with it the way I could write the circuits. And again, but I don't mess with the integrity of the 3 tiers.
Yeah.
And I don't want to mess it. That's the thing, is don't mess with the order. Choose whatever you want. Like I tell people all the time, your tier 1s are what you believe in. Like, for example, I used to be a monster back squat tier 1 guy. I don't know if I'm that anymore. I think I'm a front squat.
Mm-hmm.
But Mike Boyle's a single leg guy, right? So his tier 1 could be, let's just say for argument's sake, it's the rear foot elevated squat. So every exercise under that is going to look, Mike could look a lot different than what mine's going to look like under a front squat.
Right.
Because if you're an offensive lineman and you're in year 1 or 2 in college, your tier 2 is going to be probably a variation of a back squat.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Where his might be a pistol squat.
Right.
And then he may go into lunges and step ups and things like that. So it's really conducive to that. Even in the NFL, I had guys whose tier 1 was rear foot elevated.
Yeah.
That's where I enjoy guys like Mike Boyle because they stimulate my thought.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about front squatting as much as I did till I read his stuff in the late 90s. The single leg movement, never really thought about that earlier in my career with the women's basketball team at Boise, but it started resonating even more with continuing to read Boyle stuff.
Yeah.
And, like people like to tie me into West Side. Well, I do Olympic lifts. I lift 3 days a week, whole body. That's not the West Side template.
Right.
Now, the principles of the training cycles and things, that's how we learned how to manipulate some of those things that were conducive to athletics. And again, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I reserve the right to be wrong. I think Louis has a lot of great things to say, but he's never lived 365 days in somebody like my shoes.
Right.
Just like I don't live 365 days in his shoes. There's a lot of things that they do that have transferable traits to an athletic-based strength training program. Then there's some that doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell people, you have to read between the lines.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm working on a project now, an online course about Prilipin's chart.
Mm-hmm.
Because Prilipin's chart, you either really you really think you understand it and you love it, or people think it's BS because it's based off of Olympic lifting and it doesn't conducive to strength movements. But yes, it does in athletics, because everything you're trying to do in athletics has an explosive component.
Right.
Like we're always promoting maximal concentric acceleration. So these are things that I want to bring up in this process, because my charting system that I created is fairly unique, and people have told me you need to do this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do it. But what I remember, even with the tier system, we've talked about a little of the hidden things here, and even with Louis stuff, and again, it's a kind of a corny analogy, but I always tell people, why do you think when you read research papers and books, most of the time it's double spaced? Because they want you to read between the lines and come up with your own thought.
Yeah.
All I want to do is stimulate thought. I'm not selling you the tier system.
Right.
Because I know there's nothing set in stone training athletes.
100%.
West Side has done how much for powerlifting, but Eddie Cohn didn't train that way.
Right. Right.
You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of different methods that are out there that are not the West Side conjugate approach. But there's a lot of cool things that were brought into play. Like when we started getting into this terminology war of what periodization looked like and how you trained, well, look at what we were doing, and we didn't even know it was undulated or whatever you want to call it. When you do a typical, I go into my first year of college strength and conditioning at Boise State. So we're doing cleans for explosive strength. We're squatting and front squatting, benching and inclining for absolute strength. And then we're doing all lat pull downs, leg curl, leg extension, toe raise for lean body mass. Well, guess what that is? It's friggin' undulated periodization.
Yeah.
Didn't even know we were doing it. And I remember my first time I talked about that in early 2000s. I said that, and a couple of the older strength coaches started laughing. You know, now there's some order to it. It's like the tier system. When you look at the programming for the tier system from the cyclical side, and that's how we came up with the rotation, it's based off the old heavy, moderate, light programming.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, but what happens is, as you know, is the heavy day is not conducive to success unless you're a competitive athlete on special supplements. The light day is too easy, and the moderate day was a great work day for athletes.
Right.
So how do you do that? Okay, you make one exercise heavy, one exercise moderate, one exercise light. Well, if you do that, you can't always start with the power clean. Yeah. You can't always go to the squat. You can't always go to the bench, because then the power clean is always going to be heavy, the squat's always going to be moderate, and the bench is always going to be light. And those were usually the three big things you tested. So now you got to manipulate the order. And my thing was, forget about fast or slow. If I want these specific indicators to be the things I'm going to test, I'm training them first, regardless of speed.
Right.
And then I'll do the supplemental variation second, and I'll do the ancillary supplement work third. And that was based off of a traditional linear periodization, heavy, moderate, light. So if heavy day was 85%, the moderate day was 75%, and the light day was 65% for the same sets and reps. Traditional periodization. Now I start learning Louis Simmons. The first thing that resonated with me was dynamic effort.
Yep.
Right? And then at that time, Hatfield's, I started reading about Hatfield's compensatory acceleration. Yep. And as you know, with Hatfield's work, it made a lot of sense on the concentric movement to move things explosively, because that's what you hope to do in athletics. The problem was, without the accommodating resistance, you had to slow the bar down faster. Yep. So the lighter the load, the sooner you had to slow it down. Yeah. Because then you would lose technique, bad things, you'd have form breaks. Chains and bands allowed you to fight longer through acceleration. And I think that's what started to help people blow past the mini max or the sticking points of a lot of lifts, was the addition of some accommodating resistance. So the combination of what Hatfield had talked about and then the implementation of chains and bands really progressed what maximum concentric acceleration looks like for athletics.
Yeah.
Well, to me, when you're talking with Louis with the dynamic effort and you look at these sets and rep ranges, well, that's your light day. So right away, we threw out the term light. And so tier 3 became dynamic effort.
Yep.
It wasn't until 2000 and early 2000s, and that's now, so that's 1996-ish at Boise State.
Yep.
It wasn't until the early 2000s that we were on a board, and I had just read Tom Myslinski's conjugate system training from the Soviet Union. That was his thesis, his master's thesis, that I finally took Zatsiorsky's maximal strength, repetitive strength, and dynamic effort strength methods into fruition on how to rotate those through the first 3 tiers. And that's when I considered us not just a daily undulating program, but it's a session undulating program.
Yeah.
Because you're training one of those categories, either maximal effort or submax effort, dynamic effort, and then a repetitive effort type of version. So we even go one step further to what people talk about today of what, daily undulation is usually like 1 day heavy, 1 day light. It's the old heavy, moderate, light, except you're using different terms and different intents.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing that in one session.
Yeah.
And again, if we've learned anything from CrossFit that I think is positive, even though, again, from a programming standpoint, I still like, wow, man, I can't believe they program this way, is the body is highly adaptable if the athlete is capable.
Right.
You know what so when you're watching the professional CrossFitters, that's the elite athlete of the world.
Yep.
And they've had to train to be adaptable. And that's the same thing with training athletes. There is no right or wrong if you're training the athlete and they can adapt.
Yeah.
If the athlete isn't adapting, they may be the outlier of your bell curve model, and then you're going to have to make your tweaks from that individual standpoint. But generally, most of the people you're dealing with have a level of athleticism to adapt.
Yeah. And
that's where I keep going back. Everybody talks about you can't, but they take out the common factor that the body will either adapt or it won't. And if you're dealing with similar level athletes, they're probably going to adapt. And the ones who can adapt better than others are the ones who go to the next level.
Right.
And that's the thing that I think and again, I'm a fan of professional CrossFit athletes because I can't believe what they do. Right. They continue to tell me that continue to create the programs you're creating, because the adaptable high-level athletes you work with are going to be able to succeed. Mm-hmm. And generally when you see the ones who can't, they're probably going to fall off. I hate to say it, you get washed out.
Yep.
Or as a coach, and if they're, like a walk-on, we just saw a walk-on from Wake at a scholarship, but like some walk-ons are generally sometimes not as athletic as some of the highly skilled, then you can monitor adjustments that way. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those things where I don't like when people say you can't do that. I've proven, and many others have proven. When I first met Matt Ray in 2004, before he in the beginning of his sports performance journey, we talked about how we were training guys, and he goes, "You can't do that." I go, "Well, we do it every Wednesday." And he came and watched and goes, "Man, you're like 10 years ahead of the research."
Yeah.
And, and I said some smart remarks, because that's what I was back then, but I didn't care about that. I just knew it worked.
Yeah.
And I knew that what I was doing had I don't want to say direct, but had transferable relatedness to what was going to happen in their sport.
Right.
Because we were mimicking as close as we could metabolic demands of what happens. Multiple singles with 30-second rests that mimic play drives. Our version of cluster work. And then the fact that the guys could continually get stronger and set new PRs was based off of adaptation of the training effect. Mm-hmm. The fact that we must have hit the right percentages as far as getting them to that test date. So a lot of factors go into it, but it comes back to taking a chance and not just, that's my thing now, is there is so many strength coaches that are so much more educated than the generations before them when it comes to the knowledge and the wherewithal of what they've learned in academia, but it's just a regurgitation of someone else's material. They have no presence of mind to create that and make it their own.
Right.
Like, what is, like, if I ask you like, you brought up a couple of things. If I ask you your opinion of the tier system, you're not going to regurgitate my book.
No.
You're going to give me your opinion. Yep. And that's what I ask people. Hey, what do you think of this? Well, Louis says that. I don't care what Louis says. Right. Well, Verkhoshansky says this. I really don't care what he says.
Right.
What is I need your interpretation, because you're the one who's out there on the floor.
Yeah. Yep. You know what, Coach? I love it all. And like I said, I strength coaches out there need to buy the book, and because it was a big help for me. I've taken up enough of your time. I want you to let people know where they can find you, and you know what you're doing, so they can find you on Instagram or whatever, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So right now I'm in a new role. I'm the vice president of performance education at Dynamic Fitness and Strength, a strength and conditioning equipment manufacturing company out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. If you want to, I'm really proud of our 60-second strength coach blog that's on the site. If you really want to read some really cool practical stuff that can help you in program design and just your thought methodology, head over to the site, go to education, and click on 60-second strength coach. I think we've got over 30 blogs now, and it's I'm really actually pretty proud of some of the stuff we put out there. I think it's very good practical content, especially if you're in school and you're learning the science. This could give you a good background of someone with 30 plus years of experience and has lived through a lot of it. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Big House Power, and I'm cool with DMs. Like, that's the way we communicate now. I mean, that's how we communicated for this. It's kind of funny. Like, you know, that rap song, It's Going Down in the DM. I want to rewrite one that's called It's Going Down in the Strength Coach DM, because some of the stuff I get from the strength coach side, it's like, whew, okay, man, this is a totally different world I'm living in.
Well, I tell you what, I'd love to do this again sometime, so I'll slide into your DMs and down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I can go all day, man. I appreciate it. Was a fast 95 minutes or so, and
I love it.
Yeah, but again, I appreciate you doing this. I know it's hard. I mean, I've tried to do these things, and I'm still have some ideas. Like on YouTube, we're trying to create a vlog. I started strong during the summer, and then my partner, my son, left for college, and trying to do stuff on your own, as you know, is tough when you got other things to do. And, you know, the social media world is real interesting, and content posting and what's relative, what's viable. And then you've got the people who use social media more for their attacking and, you know, just trying to be that other person. Like, instead of being the support, there's always those groups that they're just looking for something that they can be the antagonist about. I've learned that my role in this and where I fit in the history, I guess, of strength conditioning, I've got to be very aware of how I play that game.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to get caught in a bad situation. But sometimes I watch some of my colleagues that I respect get into those games, and I'm like, why do you waste your time, man? It's just like, because they'll always try to get me to chime in and go, man, I can't get into that.
Get on online battles and stuff.
No, man, it's not good for it. It's just not good for me. I'm not going to sit here and lie. There's things I want to just blow up on.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
But, you know, then you're that guy, right?
Right. 100%.
I don't need that at this point in my career, man. I feel pretty confident that I know where I stand.
Yeah, you know you. All right, Coach. I want to thank you very much, and we'll do it again sometime if you're willing. And
yeah, man, for sure. I appreciate it. I'm glad we got it done quick.
All right. Thank you, Coach.
All right, we'll see you, man.
Bye-bye.
Bye.